Now, I'd like to begin today, and this is always the danger of this, with two observations from the sermon this morning. From the service. One from the sermon, and then one from the lessons. The Old Testament lesson from Ezekiel 37 is hermeneutically, that means interpretively, very important. In fact, I heard this lesson in a special way for the first time here at Zion. When I was here in the 80s, that opened up a whole vista for me. Now, toward the end, it says, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say, our bones are dried up, our hope is lost. He's speaking to the people in exile. We are clean cut off. Therefore prophesy and say, thus says the Lord, behold, I will open your graves and raise you from your graves, O my people. I will bring you into the land of Israel. Now that's clearly metaphorical talk about the bones and things like that. He's going to bring the people back. But what happens in Matthew 27 at the crucifixion of Jesus? The graves open and the bodies of the saints come out. So what you see, and this is why this was hermeneutically very important for me, this lesson. You see this over and over again, and we will talk about this in the future in some detail. I just thought I'd titillate your tittles right now. Is that there is an essential move hermeneutically from the Old Testament to the New Testament that goes from non-literal speech to literal. Thus, David, as an example, or the king of Israel, is called the Son of God in Psalm 2 and Psalm 46 and Psalm 110. Well, obviously, the king is not literally the Son of God. But then what happens in Jesus? The true, literal Son of God comes. And that move there, that move between metaphor and literal. Israel was called God's son. Moses says to Pharaoh, let my son go that he may serve me. And Jesus is called the Son of God by the voice from the sky. So this is, so to speak, the essential, this is the essential hermeneutical move between the testaments. And so you get this, for example, in Psalm 22 and Psalm 69, talking about David, where it says, where he's suffering his friend's betrayal. They gave me vinegar to drink. Well, on the cross, they gave Jesus literally vinegar to drink. See? So, and this insight to this all started with this Ezekiel 37 passage. That here he's talking in this kind of metaphorical way, the people without hope in exile as dry bones, but the stuff is done in such a way that it is a preview of, a foretaste of, and a non-literal instantiation of what's going to come later. This happens over and over again. I think the center of this all is the word son. With Israel being called the Son of God and the King being called the Son of God, then Jesus comes as the King Messiah and as the people of God, literally as the Son of God. Okay, second, was apart from Pastor's sermon this morning. that was very disturbing, Marge, what he was saying about those people talking about, against Christianity and their true Hebrews and so on and all that. Folks, we'll talk about this further in the future. This is all you need to know. 2 Corinthians 1:20. As many as are the promises of God, in Him is the yes. Everything else falls by the wayside. So the notion that he was talking about, that somehow there are true Hebrews or God's promises are apart from Christ, is a simple, fundamental error. And what you have to do, if I may put it like this, you have to make a very critical decision when it comes to interpretation. This is a big scale decision, okay? There's nothing quite that speaks to it directly. You have to kind of infer the stuff. But here's your decision. You have to decide, are you going to understand the Old Testament in the light of the New, or are you going to understand the New Testament in the light of the Old? Which one are you actually, if I may put it this way, privileging as you do your interpretation? Now, this class has been very good. You guys have responded really well here to the basic notions I've been putting out, that signs, signifiers, are always understood in relation to one another. Well, whenever you're doing relational things, you have to ask, where's your anchor? Where's sort of the place you start, or the non-negotiable? And the fact of the matter is, this is a, Marge, get this on tape. This is a giant question, like this huge question here, okay? And the question is, am I going to privilege the Old Testament or the New Testament? The testimony of the New Testament is as many as are the promises of God, and Jesus is the yes. And if you're doing what these people are doing, Marge, what your husband was saying, they've just got it fundamentally wrong. And I have to tell you, this is the essential issue with millennialists who want to track all kinds of stuff out of the book of Daniel, and all kinds of things like this. You got to realize this. The center of everything is Jesus, and what He's doing, He's not a side game. It's not like God's got some special deal going with the Jews, and then Jesus came and did some side game with the Gentiles. No. He is the game in town. There isn't any other game in town. And, it was very interesting to me what Pastor Monkey was saying this morning. Because these people are making, I guess I would put it like this. It's millennialism with a racist twist. Okay? So it's like millennialism, where you think the Jews are the big game. And then you put the racial thing in there, so it's even worse. But you're just kind of, Mark, you're not getting the big thing right. See, that's the thing, you're not getting the big thing right. And when you talk with millennialists, this is what's such a big problem. You can't argue individual passages, because it's the framework that does you in. It's the framework that, the way Pastor started out today was really good in the sermon, when he said, people think that, and you can see now how he started it this way with where he was going, that Christianity is exclusive. Well, it is to this extent. Jesus is like, I'm going to have to use, you're too young to remember this, but do you guys remember when Perot was running in 1991, and he was arguing about the NAFTA agreement. And he said, that great sucking sound you hear are all the jobs going south of the border. All right? I'm going to use this as an analogy, or as you would say, mutatis mutandis. Yes. The great sucking sound you hear in the Bible is Jesus sucking all the promises into himself. He is the people of God. He is the suffering servant. He is the Messiah. He is God himself. He is everything. And that's why, Mike, you are baptized into Christ. And once you're baptized into Christ, the whole game is yours. That's the background. The great sucking sound is the background to the en Christo idea. It's why St. Paul is the most brilliant theologian of all the writers in the New Testament. He got this point and related it to us. So that was very disturbing what Doug was saying this morning. Just from it is hermeneutically so wacky. You know, you can talk about it being racist or something like that, but you're just going wrong here, folks. And, you know, people have just got to see how important these huge questions are. There isn't a place where you can actually, well, I think 2 Corinthians 1:20 does it pretty well, but, you know, otherwise it's hard to prove that to people. I mean, I've had conversations with millennials, and it's hard to make any progress. So, you know, here's another way to put this. In your system of interpretation, there's always going to be hard stuff. There's stuff you can easily take care of, and then stuff you can't explain to people. Here's the way I would put it. Make sure where the hard stuff is on the edges. See, in other words, here, you can't do this. You can't have all your stuff messing around with the Old Testament, and then the thing you can't fit into the system is Jesus. He's some sort of wheel on the side or something. No. He's the center of everything. If you can't explain this passage in Daniel or something, fine. You know, just don't make Jesus the problem. Yeah, this is the problem with the millennials. Essentially, they've got all this other stuff figured out, and then Jesus turns out to be a side game for the Gentiles. So this was these two factors in our service today: the Old Testament lesson, and then the sermon. I mean, we're big. I was thinking about the class all the while. You know, I was thinking, this is great, because you got all this raw material here for the class, just coming right out of the service, and it's all it's all positive. It's not like, did you hear what Pastor said? Oh, you know, it's not like that. No, it's all positive stuff. All positive stuff. Great. Okay. Well, listen. So let's go to our outline.
Jim, I got a question over here.
Yeah.
To me, this is disturbing to hear that so many learned people are so off the bat. I mean, kids in first grade can tell you who's the center of the Bible.
Yeah. Well, you know, you're right about that. I'll tell you what. I think I can speak to that in the next session. Thank you for raising it. I think I can speak to it. Okay. Good. Well, I'll tell you what. Now we're on B1, the semantics thing, and we've pretty well done A, 1, 2, and 3. We talked about referent. Remember, we talked about those parables from the Gospel of Thomas. I don't know that I necessarily have to spend all that much time on syntax. We did a pretty good job when we were talking about the problems, and I showed you Genesis 1, and I showed you especially Ephesians 4, and so forth. But I want to just talk about a passage that shows you how should I say it? Shows you how syntactical issues lurk everywhere. Would you all please go to Galatians 2:16, and Judy, I need you to do the King James. Galatians 2:16. Now, this has become a huge point of controversy in New Testament studies. Now, I'm going to have Jim read 2:16. Jim, to about halfway where it says Jesus Christ.
Okay, from the ESV, right?
From the ESV.
Okay. Yet we know that a person is not justified by works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ.
Okay, but through faith in Jesus Christ. All right, Judy, would you read that beginning part from the King James?
Knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Jesus Christ.
Whoa! But by the faith of Jesus Christ. And Jim has faith in Jesus Christ. Oh, why? It's because the Greek has a noun and then one dependent on it in the genitive. So you have the word for faith, this, and then you have what a genitive, so it would be of Jesus Christ. Now, here's the issue. These phrases, that's what you did, was literalistic. These phrases with of can be either subjective or objective. Now, here's what I mean by that. If I say, love of my wife drives me on, do I mean my love for her or her love for me? See, love of my wife. Or Paul says in 2 Corinthians 5, the love of Christ constrains us. Is that his love for us or our love for him? This is what in kind of, I don't know what you call it, sort of basic level grammar. They talk about it as the difference between subjective, Christ's love for me, he's the subject of the love, and objective, my love for Christ, he's the object of the love. Now, let's go behind the screen. What's actually happening behind the screen? I'll show you what's happening. When you say love of Christ, which is like faith of Christ, this word and this word, which are controlling the phrase, that controlling noun is a verbally based noun. So in other words, it's not a noun like chair or ceiling or book. It is a noun like ministry, love, hope, faith. See, those all are based in the underlying verbal activity. So, when you interpret these phrases, what you do, or what you should be doing, you certainly do this if you have a hermeneutics class. That is, you put this back into its verbal, deep structure. Somebody loves somebody. And so if I try to figure out what love of Christ means, I don't look up other examples of the phrase love of Christ. What do? I return this phrase to its deep structure, which is centered in this verbally based controlling noun. And what I look for is the verb. I look for the verb. Now, this is why 2:16 is such a good example. So, Jim, I want you to read 2:16, not that one. Yeah, go back. And this time, I want you to read the whole verse, not stop halfway.
Yet we know that a person is not justified by works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ. So we also have believed in Christ Jesus, in order to be justified by faith in Christ, and not by works of the law.
Okay, now stop. Now, did you hear that? We have believed in Jesus. So their faith, the underlying verb in English isn't so clear because we go from faith to believing. In Greek it's very clear. It's pistis and pistoia. So when you take this now and go back to the verbal root, then you ask, who's doing the believing and in what are you believing? Is your basic underlying deep structure and kernel sense that Jesus is believing something? Or is it that we are believing in Jesus? Well, it's the second one, right? See, so that then is your deep structure relationship between faith and Jesus. Now, we do this in English all the time, but we don't use genitives usually. We usually just stand two nouns next to each other. Let me give you a really good example. Take the word sail, which is a noun anchored in the concept of selling something. All right? Now, I want you to think about these phrases. Shoe sale, garage sale, fire sale, year-end sale, charity sale. Now, nothing's changed in the word sale. But the relationship between the idea of selling and those other nouns has changed completely. Everyone's different. Shoe sale, if somebody is selling shoes, it's an object. But a garage sale, you're not selling a garage unless you're in Oregon. I've seen ads for this, garage sale. 2-car garage, you're going to buy a kit, $3,000, something like that. Right? But if you're not there, garage sale means what? You're going to have a garage sale, Lois is dragging all the crap out from the house, putting it in the garage, right? So it's locative. It's the location of the sale. You mean so-and-so is selling stuff in the garage. What's a fire sale? You're not selling fire. That's causal. Sale because of fire. How about year-end sale? That's temporal. It's happening at the end of the year. And charity sale is purpose. You're selling stuff for charity. See? Now, they all look the same and pity the poor guy coming from Taiwan. Because here's how you would say it. We would say, people would just generally say, well, they don't know the phrase. This is the way to put it. They don't know the deep structure kernel sentence standing behind that phrase. And sometimes even we, as English speakers, don't know. Let me give you 2 examples. What is, and I use this in class, and I usually have about 20% of the people who don't know this phrase, even though they're native English speakers. Motorcycle ministry. Now, you have the word ministry. There's your verbally based noun. So you got to have something with something's ministering. Somebody is ministering. Now, what do you suppose is the kernel sentence behind motorcycle ministry? What do you think? Yeah.
Pastor rides a motorcycle to serve as preaching station.
All right. Pastor rides a motorcycle in order to service his preaching stations. Certainly possible, and you know what? That's exactly its meaning in Papua New Guinea. But in the U.S., it generally has a different meaning. What is it? Yeah.
You're ministering to people who are riding motorcycles.
Exactly. You are ministering to bikers. Okay? So that you're not ministering by riding around. Geez, I should have paid you to do that.
Just call the other one biker.
Yeah. But now, Sarah, look how complicated that is. Because you're not ministering to motorcycles. You're not ministering on motorcycles. You are ministering to people who ride motorcycles, which means it's actually a metonymy, some associated with something, like the White House says. It's not the shutters flapping, you know. So when you say motorcycle ministry, I mean, think how complex this is. Somebody is ministering to people associated with a motorcycle, group or something like that. Now, all of that has to do with this concept of deep structure and basic kernel sentences. So, when you here is the kind of too simple way to say it. Is you say, well, what kind of relationship is there between these words and the controlling word? Well, the fact of the matter is, here's how you have to really say it. What is the deep structure of the phrase shoe sale, fire sale, garage sale, charity sale, whatever you're saying? See? And how do you know that? Only because you've heard the kernel sentence. See, if you never heard the sentence, so-and-so is ministering to people who ride motorcycles, or you've seen a picture or something, you kind of don't know, because, Jim, not only is your choice logical in a certain sociocultural context, it is the preferred view. See? So, now, that's all essentially syntactical. We are talking about, what is syntax? The relationship between meanings. That's what it is. Relationship between, not the meanings of individual words, it's relationship between meanings. And folks, that's where the mischief is. Most people think everything revolves around word studies. No. It's this stuff where the mischief happens, is on a syntactical level. What's the deep structure? Let me speak some Voelz gobbledygook here. The deep structure of the genitive constructions. See, that is where you get the mischief. Or, how do those clauses relate to one another? Remember about the image of God and male and female? See? Now, there's no sign on the side of your Bible page that says, well, this is a repetition or it's going on or something like that. You're doing all this. You're doing all this. So, that point here, what was this, point 4? Yeah, that point syntax. We can do whole clauses like we did, Genesis 1, Ephesians 4. But it's fun to do it with something like this because it's compact and there's at least potentially a linguistic solution to it, namely, find the deep structure kernel sentence. All right? So, now I'll conclude with this. This particular 1 in Galatians 2 is really important because for the last 25 years, it has roiled Pauline studies with a whole bunch of people, including, oddly enough, the majority of the exegetical faculty at CTS have embraced this notion that faith of Jesus is a subjective genitive with Jesus being the subject of the verbal activity. Here's the basic problem. There is no kernel sentence anywhere in the Bible that supports that. But there are plenty of kernel sentences that go the other way. Like in the second half of the verse which you read, we have believed in Jesus Christ. The reason that people get fooled by this is they think when they hear faith of Jesus, let's see if I can say this right. When they hear that phrase, they tend to gravitate almost immediately to the subjective genitive side, not realizing that for Greek uses that of genitive thing the way and with the frequency that we stand nouns next to each other. Shoe sale, fire sale, garage sale, charity sale, all that sale. See? Greek does, it never does this. It never does this. It always uses the genitive. So you've got to be attuned here linguistically that even though it sort of sounds like what you read there with the King James, the minute you hear a genitive dependent upon a verbally based noun, boom, up go the antenna, and you got to realize, aha, I got to figure out what the kernel sentence is standing behind it. And that's a syntactical issue. That is a totally syntactical issue. Okay, any questions? Yeah, Jeff.
That might be off the wall, but if somebody says it's what Jesus is doing to believe it,
Yeah.
if Jesus is God, he doesn't believe anything. He knows everything.
Yeah.
We believe because we can't see what we don't know.
Yeah, well, you know,
And he knows everything, so
yeah.
isn't that insulting his majesty?
Well, I think they usually head in the direction of sort of like with John, believing the Father and being faithful. Here's what happens. For the people going to the subjective side, they morph the discussion from believing to being faithful, which has that same pist stem.
Oh, okay.
See? Yeah. So, in other words, let me put this up here, Jim. So you have pistis for faith, and then you have pistoio, I believe, and then you have pistos, which is faithful. So this right here, and let me transliterate for everybody here, that's P-I-S-T, okay? So, all those roots are the same, whereas in English, and this is what fools people, we have faith, faithful, believe. See, we don't ever say this, I faithed Jesus. See, if you had that, then this would be a lot more obvious. We do it with love. We do it with love, right? But that's really a good question, and see, this is part of the problem. Well, I should tell you this, Jim, you'll appreciate this. That big name scholar, Richard B. Hayes, he's at Duke, is one of the chief proponents of the subjective genitive thing. And he's written quite a lot on that. Well, for quite a few years, every time I saw him at SNTS, I'd say, well, Richard, have you found a kernel sentence yet that does this? So I finally stopped doing it because there aren't any. See, there aren't any. So there's no sense trying that. But thank you for that question. That was really good. Okay. Any other Any other questions? Yeah, Walt?
Well, I kind of blame Mark Luther for a lot of this because his main teaching was to hammer down the core
Yeah.
so people would understand and then don't get so involved in the periphery.
Yeah.
And he said, be sure that the core is repeated
Yeah.
again and
Yeah.
again so you don't forget it.
Yeah, that's right.
But then, because you can only assume so much
Yeah.
or intake so much.
Right.
So then, that's where the theologians come in. When they really study deeper than the main core. Luther was teaching people who were not that intelligent at that time.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd say that, but they're not that
Our
well
schools.
educated. Yeah. They're not that well educated. That's true. Yes, that is right. That is right. Hey, can somebody, Mike, can you bring up on your phone, or maybe Ned can do this? Can you bring up on your phone what the Luther Bible is for Galatians 2:16? Because I'd like to see how he translated that.
And I was going to tell you, the New King James went to excuse me.
Went to in?
New King James went to in.
Yeah. And by the way, Marge, let me just say this for the recording. Say here, Marge has said that the New King James in Galatians 2:16 went to in faith in Jesus. Now, I just want to observe, Marge, and thank you for bringing that up. This is why you have to be a little careful. I mean, I'm not saying this in a negative way because I think they've done very many good things. But if you are a King James devotee, you have to be careful. The King James New King James, actually made more changes than you think. See stuff like this. It isn't just that they went from thou to you. It's not just that. They actually changed some material things like this. Yeah. So they went from subjective to
If
object.
I translate it from German to English, it's especially through the belief in Jesus Christ, sondern durch den Glauben an Jesus Christus.
Oh, Glauben an.
Yeah, Glauben an.
Yeah. See,
Jesus
so he
Christus.
takes it objective.
Yes.
Yeah.
He does. He
Yeah.
believes in Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. And that's right. I mean, contextually, that's.
Well, but they have a genitive that we don't.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Well, no, but see, they've switched it into a prepositional phrase, which is fine. You have to do it. Okay, hey, this is great. Now, here, what I thought I'd do for the remainder of our time is let's do B. B, levels or orders of words and meanings. And I'll tell you what, this is really fun. If you don't get anything else out of this Sunday morning Bible class, you'll have wasted your time. No, but this actually is really important. When you interpret a narrative, like the Gospels, you actually are able and do interpret it on kind of 3 levels. And here's what I mean. I'm going to erase the board here. And I can only do this part of our outline because we've done the previous and we have been able to distinguish between signifiers, conceptual signifieds, that is to say, the idea in your mind that arises, signifieds, and reference. Okay. Now, the reason I participate in this mumbo jumbo is because the word signify, as opposed to word, allows you to expand the discussion so that other things besides words sign meaning. Other things besides words signify. You all know this because you know the expression, actions speak louder than words. What does that mean? You can read actions, Ed, as you would say, semiotically, right? See? So, you can read actions for their meaning. Actions convey a message. What is this other than to say actions are semantically, semiotically significant? So, on level 1, let's try this. Okay, that's great. And probably nobody else in the room can read it, except children. Now, that is a set of signifiers on level 1. It is what I would call, I put it like this, marks on the page. Okay? So level 1, if you're making notes there, level 1 is marks on the page. And when you read the marks on the page, images arise in your mind which are conceptual signifiers. So these are marks on the page, level 1 marks, which are signifiers. Okay? They, remember, this is one of my favorite terms here, they elicit in your mind images, meaning, which is conceptual signifiers. All right, now, here's the big payoff to all of this. Those, listen how I'm going to say this, those conceptual signifiers, those images in your mind, may now themselves be read for meaning. And now you're reading the story on level 2. What does that say, all that Greek? Here's what it says. Jesus walked upon the waters. So that's the foundation for everything. Marks on the page are the total foundation for everything. If you can't read the marks on the page, you can't get any further. Level 1, marks on the page. Conceptual signifiers that arise. Jesus walking on the water. Okay, now, on level 2, Jesus walking on the water itself becomes a signifier. And a conceptual signifier to be something like this. Jesus is God. Normal people can't do that. See, so if I read a Bible passage, and it says, Jesus walked on the water, and you say, well, this shows me that Jesus is God, you're not reading the words anymore. You are reading the deeds depicted by the words. Let me say that again. You're not reading the words anymore. You are reading the deeds that are depicted by the words. Or you are reading, maybe this would be a better way to put it, you are reading the images elicited in your mind. That's what you're reading. Now, Think about this. In general, in the epistles, I'll talk about this further, but I'm going to make the point right now. Generally speaking, in the epistles, the theology is expressed on level 1. Paul says, God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself. The Gospels essentially do their theology on level 2. So, Jesus dies on the cross. See? Now, if you start to say, what's the meaning of that? The meaning of Jesus died on the cross is not, Jesus died on the cross. You are asking, what is the significance of that? Now you're reading the text on level 2. But everything rides on level 1. If you can't read level 1, or you're sloppy, or you're doing a pony and you're not doing the Greek text, see, now you're not going to get the right thing to read on level 2. Now there's a third level that you can read at. I don't really like the word level. Let's call it order of signifiers. I only call it level because in a way you got the marks on the page and then something else is dependent on that. There's another order of signifiers or level, and that's level 3, which is this. The fact that an author talks about something, what does that tell you about the author? So, St. Matthew says like 12 times, this was done in order that the Scriptures might be fulfilled. This was done, this happened, that the Scriptures might be fulfilled. Jesus did it in order that the Scriptures might be fulfilled. Then, people conclude something like this. Oh, well, Matthew was writing for a Jewish community that would appreciate the Scriptures. Well, what am I reading? I'm not reading the words on the page. Nothing says that. I'm not reading the fact that the Scripture was fulfilled. I am reading the fact that Matthew is talking about this all the time. That's reading on level 3. Side note. Women read on level 3 all the time and fool men. Okay? Women read on level 3 all the time and guys are too stupid to realize. Yeah, see? Now you're catching on after all these years.
No, they listen on level 3.
Yeah, okay. All right. So in other words, the fact that you're talking about something tells her about you, not about the thing you're talking about. Okay? Now Judy knows what's coming on. Is when I do this in class, I pick one poor unfortunate. I usually ask for a volunteer and somebody. This is the question. Now this would be at the seminary. Okay? I said, I want somebody to go home tonight. Somebody's married. Okay? So half the class raised it. I said, I want you to do this. I want you to go home and at supper tonight, just real casually, don't bring it up as any big thing, just say, there's a new gal working at the library. She's really got nice clothes. So see, now George, what are you laughing about? Okay? What are you laughing about? Because you know she's reading on level 3. Okay? She is not reading simply on level 1, like, oh, is that really right? You know. And she's not even reading on level 2. This would be a level 2 reading. Really? The library's got a new gal working there with nice clothes. Looks like the financial situation's looking right. That they can hire somebody who actually is making some money. That'd be a level 2 reading. But no! Lois, you're not reading it at that level. You're reading the fact that he's noticing this. Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Now, this is really hilarious because this did actually happen about 7 or 8 years ago. I had to call the wife and tell her I put their husband up to this. Right? Because she was so angry. So, But this is a classic example of reading on level 3. And people do it deliberately sometimes. You know, like for example, I'll go to a conference, somebody gives a paper, and here comes the question and answer. Well, thank you very much, Professor Williams. You know, as you were talking about the deep structure of that particular, have you seen the study by Williams done in 1986 in Logian, where he talks about the work that was done by the structuralists in the early... Now, when I'm asking a question like that, what's that about? I'm telling you how much I know, right? It's for level 3, exactly. See, people can do this, but this is essentially what was called, and I don't know, because when you went through teacher stuff, you would have had something like this, and I don't know if you call it the technical term or whatever, but this technically is called isagogics, introduction. So, you know, people say stuff like this. Luke has lots of healings in Luke and Acts. Well, it shows he was a doctor. See, well, the text never says that on level 1 or 2. You're reading on level 3. What is it? The fact that Luke is talking about stuff. All right? So, essentially, let's just review here. Essentially, we're talking about what are you reading for me? That's what this is about. What are you reading for me? If you are reading the marks on the page, you are reading on level 1. If you are reading the images elicited by the marks on the page, you are reading on level 2. And if you're reading the fact that somebody wrote something, then you're reading, and to tell you about him, then you're reading on level 3. Now, I'm going to come back to your question. That was an excellent question about the scholars and so on. Here's what happens. In scholarship, people descend to reading on level 3. So they're reading these texts, and this is what they actually occupy themselves with. What was Mark's community like that he had such a negative portrayal of the chief disciples? They never seem to understand. They all run away. They're always looking, self-aggrandizing and everything. Why was Mark writing this to a community? See, that's all reading on level 3. But this is what goes on with most of these papers. Instead of reading on level 1, where you're arguing, now what we were doing before with deep structure is all level 1. We're fooling with the marks on the page. What we were doing when I talked about the dry bones and Ezekiel and Matthew 27:53, that was reading on level 2. See? I was reading on level 2 because I was interpreting the people coming out of the graves at the crucifixion. And was saying, that's an eschatological act where God is bringing His promises. See, I'm not reading the words anymore. I'm reading the deeds. But I'm not telling you what does Matthew's community do. See, I'm not doing that. That would be reading on level 3. So I'm reading on level 2. So we'll end with this today. You can see what I'm talking about with reading on level 2. If you just ask yourself this question, and I'll tell you what, if you put this among New Testament scholars, you'll get all kinds of answers. Somebody has actually calculated that scholars have proposed at least 30 answers to this question. What is the meaning of the rending of the veil of the temple at Jesus' death? Now, on level 1, the veil tears. Okay? What is the meaning that the veil tears? That's reading on level 2. You're not reading on level 1 anymore because you're not fooling around with the words. Is it God's judging the temple? Is it God's leaving the temple? Is it God's opening the Holy of Holies so that we can get in, we have access? Is it, here's what I think it is, Isaiah 64:1, oh, that you would rend the heavens and come down, because on the veil were embroidered all the images of the heavens. Right? But you see, the problem is, when you're interpreting on level 2, now listen how I'm going to say this. When you're interpreting on level 2, you're interpreting the deeds. You'd like to have level 1 guidance. See, you'd like to have somebody writing, and I would put, level 1 is kind of like saying it this way, in so many words. Okay? So, if you had someplace in so many words that Paul or somebody said, when the veil tore, this meant God was abandoning the Jewish cult, something like that. So this raises two. I really do have to stop this. I'll be moving for it. Here's the thing. This shows you a really important principle, and that is that you can interpret the Bible on level 1 or level 2. You're interpreting the words, or you're interpreting the deeds, or the ideas. The problem is we have word dictionaries and grammars, and we don't have deed dictionaries and grammars. So in other words, you don't have something like this. If I look up here, run, and it means temple, I can look that up. But I don't have a book that goes like this. Temple, veil of, tearing, God's leaving the temple. See, now if you had that, you'd feel good about it, but you don't have that. You don't have that. And so, people tend to gravitate toward level 1. Like saying, you've heard the saying, sort of like Sadie's doctrine, seats of doctrine, that sort of thing, tend to be level 1. But there's all kinds of theology in level 2, but because we don't have a dictionary or a grammar for it, it tends to be more controversial. With what I've laid out for you, I want to contend that it is perfectly legitimate to read on level 2. We do it all the time. We say actions speak louder than words. We do it all the time. It's just that you're going to have a harder time arguing it because you don't have a grammar for the deed. And I mean, a perfect example, it's one I use all the time, rending of the veil of the temple. See, I've done chapter 15 of Mark, and I just had to confront that, and I found this, it's really interesting. I may throw this footnote in where this guy has like 30 different, explanations for it, everything like that. So, you'll hear people say, George, that interpreting this is speculation, and that's wrong. It's not speculation. You are interpreting the deeds. The problem is in justifying it to other people. What we tend to do as we interpret on level 2 is we look for level 1 elsewhere and then relate it to it. Like I did with Isaiah 64, oh, that you would rend the heavens and come down. See, what I did was I took some level 1 stuff and did this. But you notice what I'm trying to do with you here is I'm just slow walking you through the process. This is exactly what happens when we interpret. It's exactly what happens. And it's this complicated. And this is why people just don't agree about stuff. And if you don't see what I'm giving you here about levels 1, 2, and 3, if you don't see this, then you go to a society meeting, they're given a paper, and then this is the way the discussion goes about Jesus walking on the water. Somebody will say, well, this text means that Jesus walked on the water. Then the next guy says, well, no, it doesn't. It means that Jesus is God. And then the next guy says, well, it actually means that Matthew's community was concerned about nature miracles. But guys, you're all on different levels here. What do you do? We've got to all talk about the same thing, at least on a given level here. This helps you to interpret kind of what's going on. Mike, would you have a question? Oh, George.
It would be fair to say then that whatever level 2 meaning you come up with, it better be supported in plain language elsewhere in Scripture.
Well, you'd like it to be. It should be supported at least by other level 2 things. For example, Jesus condemns the temple. Well, are you going to relate his condemnation of the temple to that? I mean, I think you can do that, But other people will maybe object to that. Because that's not the same as God is giving us access to his presence, or some kind of a meaning like that. But what you are pointing out is this. We tend to look for level 1 statements to help us with level 2. Okay, and this is the final thought. This, George, after we've gone through the whole shebang here, folks, this is why we can't settle the issue of infant baptism. There's no level 1 statement. There's all kinds of other stuff. There's examples of houses being baptized. There are statements such as God would have all men be saved, come to the knowledge of the truth. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. There's a washing of regeneration. See? And you can put this all together in the post-treat pack. But there isn't the thing that says baptize infants. So you're doing it on level 2, which is fine by me. I'm a level 2 kind of guy. See? It's fine by me. But it's an explanation as to why this question gets roiled all the time. Yeah.
What about statement of Scripture, interprets Scripture?
Okay. Let me give you the Voelz answer. Which Scripture is interpreting which one? See, we've got this system kind of going here, and you're trying to find anchors and stuff someplace. This is why we can get on to talking about this, why the creeds are actually very important as a kind of an organizing factor for us. Okay, well listen, I've got to calm down a little bit. This is really a good session. This is huge here. Now, Marge, do you have any idea what Doug is thinking, for the purposes of recording, Pastor Punky is thinking with the Bible classes? Now, does it run into summer or at the end of May or what?
It runs all year.
We want you to keep going and going.
Yeah, adult Bible class runs all year.
Thank you. I'll read
But-
that level 1. Yes.
But we will not meet next Sunday.
What?
We will not meet next Sunday
For?
because we have the brunch.
Yeah, the brunch. Yeah, okay. All right. I'll talk to him about that. We'll see. I may have to wait then till toward the end of June because there'll be one more Sunday, but then I'm gone in St. Louis teaching a 2-weeker. So, good. Listen, thank you very much. Great questions.